1 in 5 Americans suffer from chronic pain. Many are now using CBD for relief.
Activists are hoping pot could be legalized nationwide by the end of 2019.
When you look at premium cannabis, the Illinois House approved legalizing recreational marijuana.
Welcome to The Budding Report, a weekly show centered around all things cannabis. Please join us in welcoming our host, Charles Horton, and his co-host, Melissa Nassitz, as they share the latest in cannabis news, conduct interviews with top leaders in the cannabis space, and promote some of the latest in science and innovation. And now to our host, Charles Horton.
Well, welcome to the Budding Report. It's a sunshiny day here in Dallas, although I think we've got more rain around the corner. I'm excited to be here, although I'm a little lonely. Charles, unfortunately, is not joining us today. He is on a plane flying to Hawaii, so don't feel too bad for him. Nothing but good wishes for him to enjoy some time in the Aloha State. But we're excited. We've got a great show today. We've got Nathaniel Gurien with FinCam, Justin Fischer with Verilief Inc. and Risk Scout. So we're very excited to have them. And of course, I've got my wonderful co-host. I'm not sure where he's dialing in from today, but how are you, Dr. Shah?
I'm good, Melissa. Still in Phoenix, fortunately. Had some traveling, as you know, the past couple weeks, but it's warming up quite a lot here, and I think summer's soon approaching.
Oh, it doesn't take long there. You know, I went to school at U of A in Tucson, and I still remember those 120-degree summers, and it's not something to enjoy when you cook eggs on the sidewalk. but luckily, everything has air conditioning, so it's just one air-conditioned spot to the next. So hopefully you have a garage to keep the car in so it doesn't get too hot.
I do.
But we're actually getting quite a bit of heat here. Although we've got the rain, it almost cooled down, but now we're getting to that lovely muggy heat, which makes my hair a little bit bigger, but that's okay. It's part of who I am anyway. So, well, we're excited to be here. Like I said, we've got an interesting news article. It's regarding how the DEA is starting to allow companies to grow cannabis for scientific research. We've talked about this in the past. It's become a huge issue. There is one location that is growing all of the marijuana for scientific research in Mississippi. And, it's what we're discovering is that the marijuana that's being produced there is not consistent with what's actually out in the market. So it's really not allowing for, good scientific study, especially when it comes to medical science. So this, I think, is a great one for you to talk about a little bit, Christian, as far as, especially from the medical aspect of it. I know we've got a couple of universities and actual companies that have already signed off and gotten the letter. And we're looking at possibly the end of the year. So what are your thoughts on this?
I think you're absolutely right that the existing research opportunities are utilizing a very non-representative strain at this point compared to really what even the common average THC content would be if you kind of averaged it out nationally. It also, to me, reflects, the very slow to respond tendencies of some of these agencies like the DEA, that only when kind of overwhelming push comes, they start to revisit certain policies that probably should have been questioned and readdressed years ago. So it's, to me, I'm not too surprised, but it almost seems like it's a bit too late anyway, because so much research has been done independent of the typical academic institutions to really demonstrate the efficacy of cannabinoid-based medicine, a lot of which, as you're probably aware, is done in Israel. I think they're leading the way. So it's like academic medicine, the DEA is playing catch-up more than anything else at this point.
I 100% agree. I mean, I think when they were signed off, it was in the, I can't remember, but I believe it was in the 60s that, they gave the Mississippi to go on this, and nobody else has been able to touch it. I mean, it's so far out of date at this point. I know that it was brought up during the Obama administration, kind of dropped off, and nothing was done during Trump's 4 years, and now we're seeing a push. And I feel like maybe this is something going towards the legalization, because by getting this, it becomes, again, something forefront in the government. I mean, that's a hope that I have. Is becoming more of a conversation in mainstream media. The more people talk about it, again, it becomes more accepted. And I think, we already know that most of Americans are actually for the legalization or decriminalization of marijuana. It's just a matter of getting it to happen, universally versus state by state, which causes so many issues for so many other business reasons. But to our guests, do you have anything to add to this article? What are your thoughts?
Look, there are some supplemental, incremental issues besides legalization or descheduling, and they involve the very burdensome IRS provision called 280E that really suffocates the profits of cannabis operators right now. That would be a nice thing for them to fix incrementally, before legalization happens. Research is another, important area where, we could be liberated prior to legalization, and banking is another area where they have a standalone relief bill. Obviously, all of this would be you become moot, and those issues would be resolved upon descheduling or legalization. So, I was really hopeful that research was probably the least freighted and hysterical thing for the legislators to get passed, and I really had hopes that maybe they might even done it last year. They still haven't gotten it done. Looks like the DEA is taking a few baby steps in that direction. Christian is right that that Israel is leading a lot of the research. There's going to be a huge amount of it that has to be done before we really have a good sense of all of the opportunities and benefits of this remarkable plant and its components and how they work in conjunction with each other. So there's, probably at least 5 years worth of research, and I'd love to see us get seriously started and have the federal government get out of the way. But again, if we get descheduling or legalization, then we don't need any of these, sort of incremental supplemental bills.
Agreed. Anything from you, Justin?
Yeah, I would just add that I spend a lot of time on both the cannabis THC and the hemp world, and a pivotal part of getting sort of national acceptance and understanding of hemp and getting sort of the Farm Bill 2018. Of these pilot states who can do this research with universities to have this data. So I think it's a little bit, it's baby steps. But I also think, whether you've seen it publicly, I do have some knowledge of some of the inner workings of the DEA. They've been moving, away from heavy enforcement as well, and so I think there are steps being taken. They're maybe not as public. I think the research is going to be critical so that we standards out. On the hemp side, FDA hasn't produced a lot of standards out, and right now we have a big issue called Delta 8. If you follow that space, and so
we have been
right. So getting research done and established and saying this is what we're all talking about. This equals that. I think is really critical to move.
Well, thank you. Again, there's so much going on right now. Everything is, for something that's been around for so long, we're finding so much more about the plant itself and, and working towards better understanding of how we need to regulate and what steps need to be done. So always interesting to hear from our guests. We're going to get to meet them a little bit better as we come back from this commercial. Up next, we have Justin Fischer.
Coming to you after our hike that we finished. Buster exercises 3 miles. Today is a recovery day because he did 8-mile hike over the weekend, broken up into 2. But what I want to share with you is this company here called Simple Changes. I learned about them and I absolutely love the concept. It's wellness, community, and organization. So as you can see here, I love the wrapping. I love purple, and it comes with 3 products. So I've been trying them out. First, it's the hemp oil spray. Then it's the hemp oil dropper and the hemp oil ball. So I'll be trying all of these out. I've been exploring them, exploring ingredients. I met with the team on Zoom. Really neat product, and I love the fact that they also want to incorporate healthy practices. So they come with a little journal and something about simple success guide. So simple changes.
Well, we're back, and now we get to meet Justin Fischer with a little more depth. He is the CEO and co-founder of Verileaf Inc. and of Risk Scout. He has over 20 years in financial technology, heavy focus on community finance, institutions, and user experience. Before Risk Scout, Justin was founder and principal consultant of Launchy Consulting, which provides MSB and scale consulting for startups and financial institutions around the country. So, bank technology. How did you get into cannabis from bank technology?
Right. Sounds like a leap, huh? Well, for the last 20 years, I've been building software for banks and credit unions to, ultimately connect these, right? It's been online banking, it's been business banking, and, I think the largest majority of institutions in this country are community institutions, banks and credit unions. And so, I've just spent a career of helping sort of Main Street businesses connect with Main Street institutions, and this issue is exactly in that wheelhouse, in that ballpark. We have a lot of lack of access to banking, and so it just made sense as we start to look at how can we take technology and solve some of these problems for that communication gap and that compliance gap.
So out of curiosity, I mean, obviously, this is a drive to make this switch over and using the experience you had. So was there something further or personal experience behind this that pushed you into it?
Yeah, so actually we're fourth generation farmers. We had a produce farm for over 150 years in South Texas, and we're now in Austin, Texas. But my dad still has about 80 acres. He reached out to me last year and said, I'm gonna start growing hemp retirement ages, and maybe ultimately into THC. And it just hit me that he knows he can grow a plant like no one else, but he doesn't know anything about the compliance space. He doesn't know that his 40-year relationship with his bank is probably in jeopardy, right? Don't want to see him get taken advantage of. So I see that, and I see about 15 or 20 businesses in the cannabis related space every day reach out having either banking or merchant processing issues. And that drives me to want to help them get connected to institutions who want to do that business, right? It's not every institution. A lot of them, opted out, as I think a lot of your listeners probably know. But that's what drives me. It's just making this connection, trying to get that access to banking for what is a legal crop. And I mean, there are a lot of safety issues and other issues with cash and lack of banking access. But really, it's just seeing these businesses prosper and these institutions, these banks and credit unions, be able to bank their community. They really do want to bank their community. They just sometimes lack the knowledge. Or it's too much overhead to kind of appease the regulators and examiners that are going to come look over their shoulder, right? I just did a presentation on Friday, and the whole thing is your bank doesn't hate you, right? They just don't understand you, right? That's part of the challenge, and some of them just decide I'd rather not learn. So Justin,
can you tell us about Risk Scout and First Pass services that you offer?
Yeah, so we have two companies, Verileaf and Risk Scout. So Risk Scout is primarily the solution for the banks and the credit unions and merchant processors, insurance, basically all financial services. They use our online applications, they verify the business, and then they do ongoing compliance. So you no longer have to go to your bank branch and provide a whole bunch of information. You can actually connect with your phone, answer the compliance questions. We have to all agree compliance is going to be here for a while in these higher risk markets. So how about we make it easier? That's Risk Scout's perspective. And then Verileaf is actually a place for businesses to come in and find banks and find insurance providers and lenders and so forth. And we have vetted providers there. And to answer your question, so first is a business verification service that we used to only offer to the institutions, but now is available to any business who wants to do what is equivalent like a business background check on a cannabis related business. So you can go through their entire sort of 360 view and let's say you're buying material, right? Your process, you're buying material from a cultivator. How do you know this cultivator is legitimate? A COA is probably not enough. Is their business, operating legitimately? Are they doing the right things? And are they licensed? And that's what First Pass does.
So it's almost a little more in-depth background check, but sort of full body review. Like anytime you're going to invest in something, then you're actually giving them sort of a portfolio or a background as far as for investment.
Yeah, well, just for anything. Like, actually, I have some real estate brokers in the Bay Area. 1 out of 5 of their leasing tenants is a cannabis-related business, but they're not all plant touching and they're not all THC. Some of them are CBD packaging. but they were willing to spend 30 to 40% over what everyone else is willing to spend to get a space because they realize this challenge. But you've got an older, more conservative, lease or landholder who basically says no, kind of baby out with the bathwater. I don't want any of those businesses in my building. It's too risky. And so that's an example where they can use First Pass to say, hey, I'm not a THC vendor, and not that there's anything wrong with that, but some don't want to lease to plant touching, and that's fine. And they can actually lease to the rest of the chain, or they can validate that on the THC side, they do have a license. They don't have any adverse media, meaning they haven't been selling and they haven't had any issues, publicly there. And they can feel comfortable that this is a tenant that's doing the right thing. I don't know about you guys, but we're a software company and we've been declined insurance at least 7 times. We almost lost our HR system last month because they thought we were too cannabis related software. And we're so far down the associated and then kicked out. And that's what we're trying to solve for.
Well, that's brilliant because I think this is something we're seeing over and over again. I mean, we've especially seen it in banking. And I think it comes down to risk management, right? Banks don't like risk and neither do landholders. I think that, even though you've got your high risk investments, but in general, I mean, it's becoming something much more mainstream, but we've got with that overhang of, potential criminalization of something that anytime the federal government can call it all and suddenly everything you've invested in is null and void. I think, definitely more information out there is key and hopefully allowing more people to invest or entrust in people in the industry to come in and do their business. Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate you coming in and giving us a little background. And Justin, it's wonderful that you are working with these third parties and getting the information out. So we've got all of your contact information up on our website. So please, for our listeners, go to thebuttonreport.com, reach out to Justin, contact him, see how he and his company can help you get further along in your business. And that's why we're here. That's what we're doing, is trying to connect people. So thanks again, Justin. And we're going to break off for a commercial, but we'll be right back.
Hello. Here on my lunch run in the middle of the heat where I get my break really quick after training clients and leading some classes. I am taking my Simply Satisfy. It is 3 sprays, organic hemp. Next one is my Simply Start. You can take it twice a day or once a day. I already took one morning dose. I'm now taking my afternoon dose. One little yummy organic hemp. Try to check them out. Simply Generous. Helicopter. All right, time to go training. Run down the hill. Bye-bye.
Well, once again, welcome back. Up next, we have Nathaniel Gurien. We met him briefly in the news segment. He is the founder and CEO of FinCam. He is an entrepreneur with decades of experience working with accountants, bankers, financiers, lenders, and government officials. Well, we've got a lot of banking on the show today. Nathaniel decided to focus on compliant banking payment solutions since they're so fundamental to the cannabis space. We just talked about it briefly. We're going to go into a little bit more depth with it, Nathaniel. So welcome. And please tell us what it is that FinCam can do.
Hey, thanks for having me on today. It's my pleasure to share with everyone. One of the most significant things that FinCam aims to do is to push back against the enormous amount of misinformation and lack of information with regard to cannabis banking and payments. And that's one of the reasons why our website is so rich in actual dependable information and data and reports and so on. So I encourage people to use that as a free community service.
Well, so when it comes to cannabis merchant processing, so this is definitely well out of my wheelhouse, but I know that there's a lot of risk involved. So who exactly is the risk taker? And I know that there's non-bank compliant merchant processing. I know there's other solutions out there, but who assumes the risk in all of this?
Well, at the end of the day, the risk is assumed by what we call the sponsor bank. They settle the transactions. They're responsible for the compliance and being sure that that they're managing the potential risk. In the payment chain right in front of them, is what we call the acquirer, which is licensed by MasterCard, Visa, Amex, and Discover to issue and manage merchant accounts. And then in front of them are either licensed or unlicensed sales representatives of either the acquirer or the sponsor bank. But ultimately, the responsibility falls on the sponsor bank. But the main issue here is exactly similar to the problem with banking, which is that there is no actual federal restriction on credit cards or banking. It is the individual businesses that have prejudice, reservations, and concerns about being involved in the cannabis business, and so they make the private business decision not to be involved in it. So the core issue with merchant processing is that the major card networks refuse to allow their networks to be used for cannabis transactions. And so for the last 5 or 6 years, people have tried to find very ingenious, clever, and often technologically advanced solutions to try to work around and circumvent that. And at the end of the day, really, the only solution is a traditional basic merchant account. And the closer we get to being able to provide that, the more we're going to have order and stability in the market.
So Nathaniel, can you first tell us what are the existing compliant merchant processing solutions available for companies, and then follow up with that on FinCan's specific new merchant processing program?
Well, there's basically 3 major, maybe 4 major ways to do electronic payment processing now in the cannabis industry. The first is to bypass the credit card networks entirely by using a Venmo-like ACH-based app that basically just charges somebody's checking account and transfers the money to the merchant. And there are different ways that that's accomplished, but essentially somebody has to download an app, put in their personal banking information, then they're set up, and the merchant can do transactions on that basis, generally off their smartphone. Another solution, one which has actually become quite stable and was recently introduced because all of the compliance controls and risks were applied by a cannabis-friendly bank, is PIN debit, ATM, and major brand debit cards. So you can now use a MasterCard, Visa, or Discover debit card or an ATM card at your merchant who has a normal merchant account. It is not available and it does not support credit card transactions, but it'll support all debit card transactions, and it's very transparent because it's sponsored by a cannabis-friendly bank. There are also several kind of PayPal-style wallet solutions, some of which are very compliant and very good, but they're oriented more towards B2B transactions. So, if you want to purchase $80,000 worth of product, you're a dispensary from your cultivator, you can easily transfer money kind of like a PayPal account between them very quickly in real time, very inexpensively. So that's out there also. And those are basically the classes of compliant, sustainable solutions. There's one solution out there, however, that's very prevalent called the cashless ATM, which is illegal and fraudulent and risky on many different levels. But up until recently, there has been no real law enforcement exposure. And so people basically have used it. And thousands of dispensaries are now currently using this, where the device pretends to be an ATM dispensing cash, but in fact does not dispense cash, and pretends to. And in most cases, the sponsor bank for the ATM system has no idea that they're supporting cannabis purchases, and so it's very fraught with a lot of problems. But the reason why it's become more concerning at this point is because of the recent federal prosecutions for bank fraud against the top officials as well as collaborators of the large delivery service Ease, in which both the ex-CEO of Ease pleaded guilty to federal bank fraud and then cooperated to have his collaborators found guilty of federal bank fraud for doing considerably milder versions of what this cashless ATM solution provides. And so now we have the heightened risk of not only the inconvenience of a fraudulent solution being discovered and shut down, and then you're stuck, and you may have to go back to cash or something. Now you have the additional heightened risk of potential law enforcement interest in this.
That's crazy. So, what? Yeah, I know you mentioned that you've got a new merchant processing system. What are you as far as FinCam? What is FinCam doing with this?
Well, we've collaborated with a cannabis-friendly bank in Florida, which is sponsoring and undertaking all of the risk to provide a PIN debit solution. So in other words, you have to put in a PIN number, and that, of course, requires that the solution is only for what we call in-person sales. They would have to be walking into the dispensary or a face-to-face delivery. And in that case, it's a standard merchant processing. It's standard pricing. It's full transparency. It's supported by a cannabis-friendly bank who, incidentally, just recently passed their second bank examination as to the compliance and sustainability of their solution, and they passed. So they've now passed 2 examinations, and so it's a solid, sustainable program. And as soon as the card networks permit it, all we have to do is flip a switch on somebody's existing terminal, and they'll be able to accept credit cards also. So it's really just plain old merchant processing with the added layer of the necessary cannabis compliance protocols. For example, you are required to have a cannabis-friendly compliant bank account that is supervising all of your transactions and making sure that the way you're handling your cash and proceeds is compliant and legal. All of the Treasury marijuana suspicious activity reports are filed by the bank. The bank makes sure that all of the money from buyer to merchant is always tracked and never gets commingled and aggregated with other funds, which is another key issue with regards to being able to track transparently the money and make sure that there's no commingling of other funds that are not supposed to be in there. So they take certain specific affirmative measures to make sure that this remains compliant and sustainable and simple and legal and legitimate. So we're actually pretty excited about it because it's a real merchant processing solution for cannabis retailers.
That's fantastic, and it looks like it's built in, ready for the growth as soon as we can get those major credit companies willing to play. So, is there a difference with the pricing? Is it pretty standard? I know that companies pay for the different credit card fees. Is that pretty much standard, even though you're using a PIN number with this processing at this point?
Well, really, it is. We've had a lot of solutions out there where people were having they had so many layers of workaround that by the time you were done, you had a possibly sustainable, possibly compliant solution that was costing merchants, 8 or 9%. And of course, that's really, something you can put up with for a period of time, but they're not really going to accept that long term. This program is just a little over 3%, which is just a little bit higher than your normal regular retailer of books and gasoline and furniture and so on would pay. They would probably pay closer to 2.5%. But it is a high risk category, and there's a lot more additional compliance involved. So 3.3% is a very, very reasonable and competitive rate, and it's probably what people will be paying in this industry for years to come. And it basically, once credit cards can also be added in addition to the debit cards, the overall rate might go up to maybe 3.5%, but that's still a very reasonable amount. And for those merchants that feel like they want to take advantage of having the customer pay some or all of the fee, which has become a lot more popular lately, they can certainly add that to the transaction before it's completed. So the merchant, the retailer, the dispensary could have a zero cost of this program if they didn't want to pay the 3% themselves.
That's perfect. I mean, people that carry American Express, they're paying more anyway, right? Well, thank you very much, Nathaniel. It's been wonderful having you on the show, learning a little bit more about how it's working in the cannabis industry with baking. Thanks to Justin as well. I feel like I've learned quite a bit, and I know that this has been a huge stumbling block for many of our viewers in the business. So knowing that we've got people working on this and that we are offering, alternatives and options is wonderful to hear. So please, to our viewers, reach out to Nathaniel, reach out to Justin. All that contact information is available on our website. Work together, continue to grow the industry, and we'll be welcome back next week with Sarah Gullickson and Rudy Roma. So we'll have new guests, new news topics, and hopefully we'll have Charles back in. So thanks again to our guests. Thanks again to my wonderful co-host and Phoenix. Try and stay cool out there, Christian, and we'll see you again on the Budding Report next week.